My father's number is from 20 years ago. How could it possibly still connect? Hyun-ha whispered to herself, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. She held the ancient flip phone her late father had left behind, a relic of a time long forgotten. With a heavy heart, she typed a short message and hit send, convinced the words would simply vanish into the digital void. She never expected an answer. Yet, as the pale light of dawn began to creep over the city, 20 obsidian-black Mercedes-Benz sedans roared through the quiet streets, coming to a halt in front of the humble public sauna where the young woman was hiding. What could have possibly happened to this girl? Before we dive into the heart of this mystery, please remember to subscribe, like, and leave a comment to let me know where you are watching from. I would love to send you my warmest greetings. Now, let our story begin. Well, it seems the guests have finally all gone home. As the last of the mourners departed from the funeral hall, a heavy, hollow silence settled over the room. Park Jung-sim, Hyun-ha's stepmother, began clearing the tables where the remains of the spicy beef soup had dried into dark, unsightly stains. As she worked, the mask of grief she had worn all day fell away, replaced by a chilling coldness. She turned her gaze toward 20-year-old Hyun-ha, who sat motionless in her black mourning robes, her spirit seemingly broken. "Are you aware of the situation?" Jung-sim asked, her voice cutting through the quiet. Hyun-ha lifted her tear-stained eyes to look at the woman. It had been only 3 days since her father had tragically passed away in an accident at a construction site. "Now that your father is gone, you and I are legally nothing to each other," Jung-sim said. She paused her fingers over a calculator and let a wicked, triumphant smile spread across her face. "Congratulations, you brat. You are officially an orphan." Hyun-ha felt as though her heart had plummeted into a bottomless abyss. For 10 long years, she had called this woman mother, enduring countless humiliations and mistreatment for the sake of her father's happiness. "Mother, what are you saying?" Hyun-ha stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Jung-sim stood up abruptly and marched into the kitchen, returning with a basket filled to the brim with coarse rock salt. "You unlucky curse. You've finally drained the life out of your own father, and now you dare to stare at me." Without a shred of mercy, the woman hurled the white salt crystals at Hyun-ha's face and her dark mourning clothes. The sharp grains stung her eyes, but Hyun-ha didn't even think to flinch. "Get out. Get out of my house this instant. Don't you ever show your face here again." "But I have nowhere to go. I haven't even gathered my father's things yet." "Things? Don't make me laugh. Do you have any idea how much debt that man left behind? I can barely take care of myself, let alone a useless mouth like yours. Now, move." With a violent shove, Jung-sim pushed Hyun-ha toward the exit. The girl stumbled and fell onto the cold, unforgiving cement outside the funeral home. A biting November wind pierced through her thin mourning clothes. Hyun-ha pounded on the locked door, her cries echoing in the empty street. "Please, open the door. Just let me take one photo of him, or anything he left behind." But the door remained firmly shut. From inside, she could hear the faint, cruel sound of Jung-sim giggling as she spoke to someone on the phone. "Director Kim, the funeral is over. I'll have the insurance money by tomorrow. Don't you worry." "Everyone." Hearing those words, Hyun-ha clenched her fists until her knuckles turned white. Her father had sacrificed his entire life for that family, and yet his wife thought only of the money. She looked up at the sky, where heavy gray clouds blocked out the stars. Much like her own future, everything felt dark and uncertain. All she had left were 2 crumpled 10,001 bills in her pocket and a battered object her father had been clutching in his blood-stained hand at the moment of the accident. Hyun-ha pulled it from her coat to look at it. It was an old 2G flip phone, its screen shattered and held together by layers of yellowed tape. In an age of sleek smartphones, no one used such an ancient thing anymore. Yet, her father had cherished this phone as if it were a holy relic. No matter how many times she had offered to buy him a new one, he had always insisted, "This is my life," and never let it out of his sight. Even on the very morning of the accident, he had pressed the phone into her hands with an unusually solemn expression. "Hyun-ha, just in case something happens to me." "Father, why are you saying such unlucky things? Just listen. If I should meet with a sudden accident, or if I should pass away, this is just a precaution." Her father had taken her hand in his. His palms were rough and calloused from years of hard labor, but they were warmer than anything else in the world. Only now did Hyun-ha realize that his hands had been trembling slightly that morning. When you truly cannot endure it anymore, when you have absolutely nowhere else to go, then turn this phone on. Just this once. But it won't even turn on, father. It's been broken for years. No, it isn't. If you charge it, it will turn on. There is only one number saved inside. His eyes had flickered with a strange emotion, as if he were recalling a deep, echoing sorrow from 20 years ago. Hyun-ha couldn't tell if that look held fear or a profound sense of longing. Contact that number. That person will protect you. At the time, she hadn't understood what he meant. She had simply thought it was the overactive worry of a tired man. But that very afternoon, he had returned to her as a cold, lifeless body. Hyun-ha pulled the old flip phone close to her chest. From the cold metal and plastic, she felt as though she could still hear the steady beat of her father's heart. Father, I'm so scared. It's so cold. Hyun-ha stood up unsteadily. She walked through the parking lot and out onto the main road, where the brilliant neon lights of the city stabbed at her tired eyes. Amidst all that brightness, there was not a single place for her to lay her head. Passers-by cast sidelong glances at her as she wandered in her thin morning clothes. Some looks were filled with pity, others with the disdain one might show a madwoman. She kept her head down and walked, her feet leading her aimlessly through the rain and tears. After what felt like hours, she saw an old sign on a weathered commercial building, 24-hour sauna. Hyun-ha felt the two 10,001 bills in her pocket. If she spent this, she would have nothing for food tomorrow. But if she stayed outside, she would surely freeze. The woman at the counter gasped when she saw Hyun-ha's black robes. Sweetheart, are you in mourning? Yes. I just need a place to rest for a little while. Oh, you poor thing. You're just a child. The woman clucked her tongue and handed her a set of sauna clothes and a towel. Hyun-ha found a secluded spot in the corner of the large room, tucked away behind a dusty pillar. All around her, people were watching a comedy show on a large television, their laughter filling the air. To Hyun-ha, those sounds of normal, happy lives felt like an unbearable noise. It seemed as though everyone in the world was happy, while she alone had been cast into hell. She curled into a ball, hugging her knees, and pulled out her father's old phone once more. Her hollow, pale face was reflected in the black screen. That person he mentioned. Who could it be? Her father had lived a solitary life with very few friends. He had spent his days moving between the construction site and their home, living a diligent but anxious life, as if he were constantly being pursued. Could such a man truly have a friend reliable enough to protect his daughter? Is it a debt collector? Or maybe, did he have another family he kept secret? 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind, but she had no other choice. She looked around for a place to charge the device, and luckily found a dusty outlet behind the pillar. She carefully plugged the flip phone into a universal charger she had borrowed from the counter. Please turn on, please. With a desperate heart, she held down the power button. If this phone didn't wake up, she would be left with no hope at all. At that exact moment, with a soft, mechanical vibration, the screen flickered to life, emitting a dim, ghostly glow. The words 2G service terminated appeared on the grainy display, but the power held steady. Hyun-ha let out a sigh of relief. Her fingers shook as she navigated the unfamiliar menu. Contacts. Contacts. She pressed the stiff buttons to open the address book. She expected a long list of names, but the directory was nearly empty. In fact, there was only one single entry. My love. The moment she saw those words, her eyes filled with tears again. My love? It was a tender, sentimental name, an expression of affection he had never shown to her stepmother, nor ever mentioned to Hyun-ha. Could her father, who had spent his life surrounded by the grit and curses of construction sites, have held such a deep love in his heart? Who was the person on the other end of this number? Hyun-ha pulled her modern smartphone from her pocket. The 2G phone was a useless piece of iron now. Unable to make calls or send texts on its own, she began to transcribe the digits from the old screen into her new phone. It was an ancient number, beginning with 011 rather than the modern 010. 011, 234, 3-4. No one used 011 numbers anymore. Years ago, the government had mandated that all numbers be switched to the 010 prefix. If she tried to call, she was certain she would only hear a recorded voice saying the number was no longer in service. Father, this is a number from 20 years ago. How could it possibly connect? A wave of despair threatened to wash over her, but she chose to believe in the look she had seen in her father's eyes. Those were not the eyes of a man who would lie to his daughter in his final hour. Hyunha took a deep breath and opened a new text message. She entered the old 011 number into the recipient box. Her fingers slipped repeatedly, her vision blurred by tears, but she forced herself to type. She didn't know how to begin. To simply say, "Please help me," felt too brazen, but to tell the whole story felt too long for such a precarious connection. With her thumb trembling, she wrote each word as if she were pouring her very lifeblood onto the screen. She had no way of knowing that this one message was about to completely rewrite her tragic destiny. "Hello. My name is Lee Hyunha. I am the daughter of the late Lee Ki-chol." Just writing those first words made her chest tighten so much she had to look up at the ceiling to catch her breath. She hadn't realized that adding the word "late" before her father's name would hurt this much. "My father passed away in an accident at a construction site a few days ago." End quote. Writing the truth made his death feel final all over again. The reality that there was no one left in this world to protect her felt like a sharp blade twisting in her heart. "My stepmother has kicked me out of the house, and I have nowhere to go. The funeral isn't even fully finished, but I have been cast out with nothing." She threw away her pride. While begging for mercy felt worse than death, she knew she had to survive. The daughter her father had risked everything to protect could not simply give up like this. "Before he died, my father told me that if things ever became too difficult to endure, I must contact this number. He said this person would help me," Hyunha whispered, her voice faltering as a new doubt clouded her mind. What if the owner of this number had long since forgotten her father? What if she was reaching out to a stranger who cared nothing for a ghost from 20 years ago? But there was no turning back now. Gathering every last shred of her courage, she finished the message. "I do not know who you are, but I beg of you, please save me. Please help me. I am pleading for your mercy." After typing the final period, Hyunha sat frozen, unable to press the send button. Her thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. If she pressed this, would it open a Pandora's box of new troubles, or would it simply end in a hollow, silent echo? "Father, please protect me," she breathed. She squeezed her eyes shut and pressed the button. A soft, clear chime rang out, a small, delicate sound lost in the humid air and low hum of the public sauna. On the screen, the long, desperate story she had poured out vanished into a chat bubble. Hyunha held her breath, her eyes glued to the display. No reply came. 1 minute passed, then 5, then 10. As the minutes stretched into an eternity, her fragile hope began to harden into a cold, heavy despair. "The number must be dead," she sighed, her shoulders slumping. How could a phone number from over 20 years ago still be active? The phone screen flickered and dimmed, entering standby mode. In the dark reflection of the glass, Hyunha saw her own gaunt face and swollen, tear-filled eyes. She bowed her head in defeat, burying her face in her knees as she sobbed silently. "It would have been better not to hope at all," she choked out. To feel hope only to have it snatched away made the darkness feel twice as heavy. For a moment, she felt a flicker of resentment toward her father. Why had he left her with such a cruel, unsolvable riddle? "You should have just left a little money in a bank account instead. Father, I hate you. I truly do." She curled herself into a smaller ball, trying to disappear. The noise of the world around her faded until there was nothing left but the profound loneliness wrapping around her like a shroud. But Hyunha did not know. She could not have imagined that at that very moment, within a private office on the 50th floor of the tallest building in Gangnam, a miracle was beginning to unfold. In the dense forest of skyscrapers along Tehran Row, the shimmering heart of Seoul, the city refused to sleep. There, in the penthouse office of Seon Tower, the most magnificent structure in the skyline, the night view of the city stretched out beyond massive floor-to-ceiling glass. The lights sparkled like an overturned jewelry box, but the master of this view looked far from happy. Kang Se-yeon, the chairwoman of Seon Group, was a living legend in the world of commerce, known to all as the Steel Queen. At 45 years old, she possessed a timeless, elegant beauty, yet she carried an aura so cold and formidable that few dared to approach her. Her employees whispered of her as the Ice Witch, a woman without blood or tears. In her presence, an invisible pressure filled the air, making it difficult for others to even draw a full breath. "Chairwoman," The review of the agenda for tomorrow morning's emergency board meeting is complete, her chief secretary said, carefully placing a folder on her desk. Seon remained focused on the window, offering only a faint wave of her hand. Leave it there and go. I wish to be alone tonight. I understand. Will you not be returning home soon? You go ahead. I still have things to attend to. The secretary bowed and retreated. As the heavy door clicked shut, a stifling silence filled the vast office. Only then did Seon allow herself a long, weary sigh. She turned her chair away from the glittering city to face her desk. The reason she stayed so late every night was not because of a mountain of work, but because of a secret, sorrowful ritual that she performed only when the world was quiet. She pressed her thumb against a specially designed biometric safe, hidden deep within her desk drawer. The heavy steel door groaned open. Inside, there were no gold bars or secret ledgers, but objects that seemed entirely out of place in such a modern office. 2 mobile phones lay side by side on a bed of rich purple velvet. One was the latest smartphone she used for the empire she ran. The other was an ancient mobile phone that looked as though it belonged in a museum. Seon's hand trembled as she picked up the old device. This was the phone she had kept active for 20 years, paying the service fees every single month just to maintain the number she had used when she said goodbye to her lover 2 decades ago. She had held on to it out of a foolish, stubborn hope, a hope that perhaps, just perhaps, he might call. She was terrified that if she ever changed the number, he would never be able to find her again. It's truly cruel of you, she whispered, a bitter smile touching her lips as she stroked the dark screen. How could you go 20 years without calling even once? The world saw her as the powerful empress of a conglomerate that moved the nation's economy. Yet here she was, sentimental and broken, over a love from the distant past. If others knew, they would surely mock her. But to her, Lee Ki-cheol was more than just a first love. He had been her only sanctuary from the hellish oppression of her father. He was the only man who, despite having nothing, had given her everything, and he was the lover who had vanished along with the child in her womb. Are you still alive? She asked the silent machine. She had hired the finest private investigators and agencies to search for him time and time again, but the man had remained hidden, a shadow in the wind. By habit, Seon plugged the old phone into a charger. Ensuring it was fully powered so she would never miss a call had become as natural to her as breathing. At that exact moment, in the absolute stillness of the office, a strange, jarring vibration tore through the air. Seon's hand froze mid-air. Her heart seemed to stop before dropping into the pit of her stomach. No, I must be hearing things, she whispered. It's an illusion. I've finally gone mad from longing. But the vibration did not stop. It wasn't the work phone on her desk. It was the secret phone, the one she had just taken from the safe. The one that had not made a single sound in 20 long years. She stared at the device as if it were a ghost. The screen glowed with a ghostly brilliance, displaying a message notification. The sender was an unfamiliar number, and the first line of text on the preview screen made her blood run cold. Hello, my name is Lee Hyun-ha. I am the daughter of the late Lee Ki-cheol, and Azala's. Lee Ki-cheol's daughter? Seon's breath became ragged. Her eyes shook as if a great earthquake were tearing through her soul. The name she had waited half a lifetime to hear was finally before her. But one word, a single, devastating word placed before his name paralyzed her mind. Late. That terrible final prefix reserved for those who have left this world. No, it can't be. I'm misreading it. With trembling hands, she struggled to open the inbox. She held the screen close to her face, her eyes devouring the words. My father passed away in an accident at a construction site a few days ago. A cry, sounding more like a wounded animal than a human, escaped Seon's lips. She clutched the phone to her chest and collapsed onto the floor, her legs giving way beneath her. No, it can't be true, Ki-cheol. Dead? Who gave you permission to die? She had waited 20 years, and now, he was gone. He had died a tragic, lonely death at a construction site. It's a lie. This must be a dream. She clawed at her chest, sobbing uncontrollably. Her expensive silk blouse was stained with tears, but she didn't care. Her heart felt as though it were being ripped apart, making it impossible to draw air into her lungs. It was an unbearable reality that the man she loved so fiercely, the man who had left to protect her, had become a cold body without them ever meeting one last time. After a long while of weeping on the floor, the next sentence caught her eye. Even through the blur of her tears, the words etched themselves into her mind with startling clarity. My stepmother has kicked me out of the house, and I have nowhere to go. The funeral isn't even fully finished, but I have been cast out with nothing. Stepmother? Se-yeon's crying stopped abruptly. She felt no sting of betrayal at the thought that Ki-cheol had remarried. Instead, she could only imagine how hard he must have struggled to raise a child alone, how desperate he must have been to feel he needed to marry again. But the words that followed struck her very soul. Before he died, my father told me that if things ever became too difficult to endure, I must contact this number. I do not know who you are, but I beg of you, please save me. Please help me. I am pleading for your mercy. A cold shiver ran down Se-yeon's spine. Ki-cheol, until his very last breath, had remembered her. He had believed that she would never change this number, that she would still be waiting, and so he had entrusted his daughter, a child more precious than his own life, to her, as his final testament. My daughter, the child Ki-cheol risked everything to protect. In a heartbeat, Se-yeon's gaze transformed. The fragile woman who had been writhing in grief vanished without a trace. Her tear-filled eyes instantly ignited with a bone-chilling fury, a cold fire that looked capable of incinerating anything in its path. She pressed her hands against the floor and slowly stood up, like a goddess of vengeance rising from the depths. An aura of pure, murderous intent radiated from her. You dared to lay a hand on my daughter? She immediately struck the intercom button on her desk. Chief Secretary, summon the entire security detail immediately. Prepare every vehicle and resource at our disposal. The secretary's bewildered voice crackled over the line. Ma'am? Chairwoman, it is 3 o'clock in the morning. What is happening? Do not waste time with questions. Act, now. At the thunder in her voice, the secretary dared not argue further, stammering a quick affirmation before hanging up. Se-yeon threw on a long black coat. In the mirror, her face was no longer stained with weakness. There was only the sharp, predatory gaze of a hunter who had locked onto its prey. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a heavy, polished golf club. Wait for me, Hyun-ha. Mother is coming. Se-yeon tucked the secret phone into her coat pocket and swept out of the office, the rhythmic click of her high heels sounding like a death knell. To those who made my daughter shed tears, I will make you weep tears of blood. And, behind her, as she strode down the hallway, a dark shadow seemed to surge. The Empress of Commerce, for the first time in 20 years, had lost her reason and begun to act. Soon, the world would learn that the rumors were true. When this woman moves, the entire nation of Korea trembles. When the elevator reached the lobby, a line of burly security guards was already waiting. Chairwoman, the cars are ready. Faced with the sharp, disciplined report from her chief of security, Chairwoman Kang Se-yeon simply nodded in silent affirmation. As she stepped into the center Mercedes limousine, 20 black sedans followed her like a somber, unbreakable shadow. The massive fleet, gliding across the wide avenues of Gangnam in the pale light of dawn, looked like an army marching toward a battlefield of the heart. Inside the car, Chairwoman Se-yeon opened a tracking application on her phone. The signal from Hyun-ha's message led to a dilapidated public sauna on the ragged outskirts of Seoul. Maximum speed, she commanded, her voice low and steady. Ignore the red lights. I will handle any fines. Yes, ma'am. Understood, the driver replied, pressing the accelerator to the floor. Chairwoman Se-yeon clenched her hands in her lap, watching the streetlights blur past the window like fallen stars. The weak, frightened girl of 20 years ago, the one who had been forced to leave the man she loved because she lacked the power to stay, was gone. In her place sat an invincible mother, armed with vast wealth, absolute authority, and a simmering, protective love. Park Jung-sim, she whispered to her own reflection in the glass, a cold smile touching her lips. For every ounce of pain you have caused my daughter, I will return it to you 1,000 times over. Tell Hera's-nang. As the ancient clock in the public sauna ticked toward 4 o'clock in the morning, the fleet of black cars roared toward Hyun-ha's location. The following morning, the narrow alleyway of a crumbling neighborhood on the outskirts of Seoul was alive with noise. Along with the agonizing screech of a rusted iron gate, all sorts of household items were being hurled into the dirt yard. Park Jung-sim was busy piling everything from Hyun-ha's room into the back of a junk merchant's truck. Take it all, every last scrap, Jung-sim barked at the driver. Books, clothes, just clear it out for me. The driver scratched his head, looking at the pile with a troubled expression. "Ma'am, this desk is still in good shape. Do you really want to sell it for the price of scrap metal? It seems like such a waste." "A waste? I'm sick of looking at it. That's why I'm telling you to get it out of my sight." "Ever one." Jung-sim rolled up her sleeves and began throwing Hyunha's textbooks onto the truck bed herself. These were the precious academic books Hyunha had saved for, penny by penny, while working long, exhausting shifts at a convenience store. Each page bore the marks of her hard work, underlined sentences from the nights she had stayed awake, dreaming of the day she could return to school despite having to take a leave of absence for lack of tuition. To Park Jung-sim, however, they were nothing more than waste paper worth 101 per kilogram. "Hurry up. I want this place scrubbed clean before that brat crawls back here." At that exact moment, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the mouth of the alley. Hyunha, who had spent a sleepless night at the sauna and returned home with a sliver of hope, witnessed the scene and came running. "What do you think you're doing?" she screamed, rushing through the gate. Seeing her clothes and books scattered in the dirt, Hyunha's eyes burned with a mixture of grief and rage. "Oh, you're still here?" Jung-sim mocked, placing her hands on her hips and letting out a sharp laugh. "You're certainly persistent. Don't touch my things. I bought all of this with my own money. Don't make me laugh. Everything in this house, down to the last spoon, belongs to me. Now, take your body and get out of here." "Everybo." Hyunha rushed to the truck and grabbed an old, worn-out padded jacket from the back. That jacket was the only birthday gift her father had ever been able to buy for her before he died. Though it was a cheap item from a local market, it was her greatest treasure, a garment soaked in her father's sweat and his quiet, enduring love. "Not this. You can throw everything else away, but not this jacket." Hyunha clutched the jacket to her chest and wept. Park Jung-sim's gaze turned razor-sharp. "Where do you think you are? Making such a scene. You're a useless, lingering curse." Jung-sim grabbed Hyunha's arm with brutal force. "I told you to let go. I've had nothing but bad luck because of you." With a violent shove, she sent Hyunha sprawling to the ground. The girl's palms were scraped raw against the rough cement, but she refused to let go of the jacket. The junk merchant, unable to watch any longer, tried to intervene. "Now, ma'am, isn't this a bit much? It's just a jacket." "Shut up. Do you want your money or not?" Jung-sim snapped, and the man fell silent. "Listen to me carefully, you brat. From this moment on, don't even think about setting foot in this house again. I am erasing every trace of you. I'm even going to burn the things that still smell like your father. Even my father's belongings? You've gone too far." Hyunha sobbed. "How can a human being do this? Human? Without money, you aren't human. You're cattle. Just like you. And does know." Just as Park Jung-sim raised her foot to strike the girl on the ground, a powerful vibration rippled through the pavement. It was the deep, low hum of engines. Engines that were silent yet full of an overwhelming authority. A sound that should never have been heard in this impoverished slum. "What is that? An earthquake?" The junk merchant looked around in a panic. A massive shadow began to swallow the entrance of the narrow alley. Every eye turned in that direction. There, an unbelievable sight was unfolding. A pitch-black Mercedes S-Class limousine glided into the alley like a great obsidian whale. And it was not alone. Behind it, identical black sedans appeared one after another. 2, 3, 5. A fleet of more than 20 cars completely took over the cramped street. "Good heavens, what is this? Is the president here?" Neighbors opened their windows, whispering in shock. The brilliant chrome wheels and the impenetrable black-tinted windows created a jarring, surreal contrast with the surrounding decay. Because the junk truck was blocking the path, the lead limousine came to a smooth halt. The moment it stopped, the doors of the escort vehicles flew open in unison. 10 burly security guards in tailored black suits, with earpieces glinting in the light, swarmed out of the cars. They moved with military precision, securing both sides of the alley and surrounding the limousine like a living shield. Park Jung-sim stood frozen, her mouth hanging open. These were cars so expensive she had never even dared to touch one, and now they were lined up right outside her door. What is happening? Is the neighborhood being redeveloped? At that moment, the chief of security solemnly opened the rear door of the limousine. The sharp click of high heels echoed against the asphalt. The woman who stepped out was middle-aged, wearing a long black designer coat draped over her shoulders and dark sunglasses. Chairwoman Kang Se-yeon. Her presence alone was enough to inspire awe and terror. Even behind her glasses, the murderous intent radiating from her could not be hidden. In her hand, she held a golf driver, one that belonged on a pristine green. Not here. It was a heavy, custom-made titanium club that felt profoundly threatening. Chairwoman Se-yeon strode into the yard where Jung-sim and Hyun-ha were standing, followed by dozens of her guards. The small yard was suddenly overflowing with men in black suits, overwhelmed by the sheer pressure of the woman's aura. Park Jung-sim retreated, but Se-yeon's eyes were fixed on only one thing. It was Hyun-ha trembling on the ground, covered in dust, her mourning clothes torn, and her father's old jacket clutched desperately in her arms. At the sight of the girl's pitiful condition, Se-yeon's lips trembled with a silent fury. The child of the man she had failed to protect 20 years ago was now being trampled so mercilessly. Who are you? Who gave you permission to bring your shoes into someone else's home? Park Jung-sim tried to scream, but her voice wavered like the bleating of a frightened goat. Chairwoman Se-yeon didn't even deign to respond. She slowly turned her head to look at the junk truck filled with Hyun-ha's life. "Clear it out," she said. Her voice was low, but her chief secretary understood the command instantly. However, before the secretary could move, Chairwoman Se-yeon raised the golf club herself. Her movements were elegant, as if she were merely practicing a swing, but the power behind it was devastating. With a thunderous crack, the driver's side window of the junk truck shattered into 1,000 pieces. The driver cried out in terror and collapsed to his knees. "Are you crazy? Why are you destroying someone else's truck?" Jung-sim shrieked, but Se-yeon did not stop. Next, the side mirror was snapped off, followed by the crunch of a headlight. With a face devoid of emotion, Chairwoman Se-yeon began to dismantle the exterior of the truck, as if releasing a lifetime of suppressed rage. It was a warning to a world that had treated her daughter like trash, an explosion of a mother's boiling resentment. Standing before the mangled truck, she dropped the golf club onto the ground. A heavy clank echoed through the yard, followed by a terrifying silence. She slowly removed her sunglasses, her cold, razor-sharp gaze piercing through Park Jung-sim. "Do not touch my daughter's things." The words were quiet, but they were so chillingly threatening that the entire alley seemed to freeze over. Park Jung-sim felt as though she couldn't breathe. "Daughter? How could this beggar girl suddenly have a tycoon for a mother?" "Daughter. Look, lady. You must be mistaken. This brat's mother is dead. Ki-cheol told me himself. She died giving birth to her." Jung-sim screamed, her words turning into insults. "You're probably just some con artist who smelled money and came crawling here. Where did a harlot like you even come from?" Chairwoman Se-yeon's brow furrowed. She walked slowly toward the woman. With every click of her heels, Park Jung-sim retreated, until her back hit the cold stone wall. Se-yeon stood inches from her face, looking down with a gaze far more terrifying than any physical blow. "A con artist?" A look of pure disdain crossed Se-yeon's face. "To kick a precious child out of her own home and try to sell the belongings of a deceased husband. Those are not words that a creature like you should ever utter." Overwhelmed by the aura of the woman before her, Jung-sim could only gasp for air. Chairwoman Se-yeon turned away, looking at Hyun-ha, who was still sitting on the ground in a state of shock. The coldness in Se-yeon's eyes vanished like spring snow, replaced by a deep, aching sorrow and an ocean of love. She knelt in the dirt, bringing herself to Hyun-ha's eye level. Her expensive, high-end coat dragged on the stained ground, but she didn't care. "Hyun-ha." Se-yeon reached out gently, tucking a stray lock of hair behind the girl's ear. Her touch was so soft, it was as if she were touching a fragile glass doll. "You were very scared, weren't you?" Hyun-ha looked at the woman in a daze. It felt as though she had fallen into a dream. The formidable woman who had just shattered a truck with a golf club was now looking at Hyun-ha with an expression of profound, soul-aching sorrow. That gaze, it wasn't unfamiliar. It was the very same look her father used to give his old flip phone. A gaze overflowing with a bittersweet mixture of longing and devotion. Who are you?" Hyun-ha asked, her voice small and trembling. At that fragile question, Chairwoman Se-yeon could no longer hold back the tears she had suppressed for so long. "I am so sorry I'm late. I am truly, deeply sorry, my child. I never knew you were alive." Se-yeon pulled Hyun-ha into a fierce embrace. A sophisticated, delicate fragrance from the woman's coat cocooned Hyun-ha, masking the scent of cold rain, mud, and the salt of her own tears. It was the scent of a mother's presence, an essence Hyun-ha was experiencing for the first time in her 20 years of life. There, amidst the fleet of obsidian cars and the silent men in black suits, a miraculous reunion was unfolding in the heart of the slums. Yet, this was not just a touching homecoming. It was the opening act of a cold, calculated justice aimed at those who had been blinded by greed. Chairwoman Seon's hands shook, her knuckles turning white as she gently cupped Hyun-ha's face. She held her with the same care one might give to a piece of ancient, priceless porcelain. Close up, Hyun-ha's face was stained with the grit of the alley, but to Se-yeon, it was clearer and more beautiful than anything she had ever seen. The curve of the eyes, the stubborn set of the lips, and the soft dimples that appeared even when she wasn't smiling. The image of Lee Ki-chol, the man who had vanished 20 years ago, was mirrored perfectly in the girl before her. Oh heavens! Ki-chol, this is the gift you left for me, Se-yeon whispered, her lips quivering. She looked deep into Hyun-ha's eyes and saw a reflection of her own younger self. It was the undeniable proof of their bloodline, the living legacy of a love that refused to die. He raised a child with my eyes, all by himself. For me, actually, the hot tears from Se-yeon's eyes fell like a summer rain, washing away the mud on Hyun-ha's cheeks and connecting their warmth as one. Hyun-ha sat in a daze, unsure of how to react. This powerful woman had just been a whirlwind of destruction, yet now she was sobbing as she held her. And yet, strangely, Hyun-ha felt no urge to pull away. The warmth of this stranger's hands was achingly similar to the hands of the father she missed so dearly. Ma'am, are you the one my father told me about? Hyun-ha asked. The one he told me would help? The one he asked to help you? Se-yeon shook her head, her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. She had never imagined that hearing her own daughter call her ma'am would be so devastating. She pulled the girl closer. Oh, Hyun-ha. The scent of luxury and elegance from the expensive cashmere coat filled Hyun-ha's senses. For a girl who had spent her life surrounded by the smell of dust and labor, this was the first time she had ever known such a refined and comforting aroma. The embrace was foreign, but every instinct told her that this was where she belonged, the safest sanctuary on earth. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were here. I'm sorry it took me so long to find you. Mother? Hyun-ha's eyes widened. Her heart hammered against her ribs as if it might break through. Could it be? Her father had always told her that her mother died shortly after she was born. The mother who had left not a single photograph. The woman Hyun-ha had spent her life imagining. Could she really be this magnificent, powerful woman standing before her? Just then, a sharp, venomous shriek tore through the tender moment. What kind of theater is this? Park Jung-sim, the stepmother, stood there panting and spewing insults. Are you insane, lady? This brat's mother is dead. Ki-cheol told me himself. She lost too much blood giving birth to her, and passed away right then and there. Jung-sim paced back and forth, unable to believe her eyes. The sight of a wealthy tycoon appearing out of nowhere, claiming the stepdaughter she had tormented as her own, made her blood boil with jealousy and confusion. This woman is trying to kidnap someone's daughter in broad daylight. Call the police. Are there any reporters around? The chairwoman of Seon Group is staging a kidnapping. Jung-sim screamed at the top of her lungs, but no one in the crowd dared to speak, silenced by the lethal gaze of the security detail. Chairwoman Seon rose slowly to her feet. The warmth remained in the hand she used to hold Hyun-ha, but her gaze toward Park Jung-sim turned to ice in an instant. She reached into her pocket and pulled out an old leather wallet. With trembling fingers, she carefully extracted a yellowed, black and white photograph and held it out to Hyun-ha. Hyun-ha, look at this. Hyun-ha wiped her dirty hands on her clothes and took the photo. In the image, a young Lee Ki-cheol stood beside a youthful Se-yeon. Her father, 20 years younger, looked bright and honest, his arm wrapped around the shoulder of a radiant Se-yeon, who was clearly pregnant and glowing with happiness. They looked as though they didn't have a single care in the world. The woman in the photo was unmistakably the woman standing before her now. Though time had passed, the elegant features and the regal aura remained unchanged. This is my father. Yes, this was taken when I was pregnant with you. You have no idea how much your father loved this picture. Seyeon said softly, stroking Hyunha's hair. Large, heavy tears fell from Hyunha's eyes, blurring the image. The smile on her father's face in the photo was the same warm smile she remembered, not the face weary from a lifetime of toil, but the radiant face of a young man deeply in love. It was a truth that could not be denied. Seyeon turned back to Park Jung-sim. Her voice was low, but it carried a chilling weight that echoed through the narrow alley. Dead? Kishol told you I was dead? Her voice was thick with a profound, haunting sadness. Overwhelmed by Seyeon's intensity, Jung-sim cleared her throat but remained defiant. What does a single photo prove? These days, Photoshop is more real than reality. You're probably just some harlot who saw a chance to climb the social ladder. A harlot, Seyeon whispered, letting out a short, incredulous laugh. Do I look like someone who came here to beg for money? The wealth I possess is tens of thousands of times more than you will ever touch in your entire life. Well, then that's even more suspicious. Why would a rich person want a beggar child? Are you planning to take her and sell her organs or something? The filth in Park Jung-sim's words had crossed every line of human decency. Seeing Hyunha's fists clenching as she began to shake with rage, Chairwoman Seyeon placed a steadying arm around her shoulders. She isn't worth listening to. Some creatures think that if you treat them with any kindness, they are human. They are mistaken. I will end. At that moment, the chief secretary leaned in and whispered to Seyeon, "Ma'am, I hear sirens. The press has caught the scent and is on its way. We must move now." Seyeon nodded. To continue arguing with Park Jung-sim here was a waste of time and would only inflict more trauma on Hyunha. Hyunha, let's go home. I will explain everything once we are safe. I will tell you why it took me so long to find you. Seyeon took her daughter's hand, but the girl hesitated. She looked back at the piles of belongings scattered in the yard. But father's things, his clothes and his pictures are still there. To Hyunha, that messy pile of junk represented the only physical traces her father had left behind. Leaving them felt like abandoning him a second time. Seyeon understood her thoughts immediately. She gestured to the captain of the security detail. Everything here, from the smallest spoon to the very dust on the floor, gather it all. Do not leave a single item behind. Send it all to the estate. Yes, ma'am. Immediately, he replied. On her command, the burly guards began to move with quiet, disciplined efficiency. They began to respectfully gather the books and clothes that Park Jung-sim had so carelessly thrown onto the junk truck. Jung-sim tried to block their path, screaming, "What do you think you're doing? This is my house. Why are you touching things in my home?" But the guards simply moved her aside and entered the house. "Hey, let me go, you thieves!" Jung-sim collapsed onto the ground, faking a dramatic sob, but no one spared her a glance. The neighbors only whispered among themselves. She got what she deserved. It's karma. Chairwoman Seyeon guided Hyunha into the plush rear seat of her limousine. As her body sank into the soft, high-end leather, the tension that had held Hyunha together for days finally snapped. The gentle warmth from the heater thawed her frozen limbs, and the soft strains of classical music wrapped around her ears like a velvet blanket. It felt as though she had been transported from a living hell to heaven in the blink of an eye. "Depart," the chairwoman commanded. The driver pulled away smoothly. The sight of dozens of Mercedes sedans winding their way out of the narrow alley was breathtaking. Park Jung-sim threw a handful of salt toward the retreating cars, shouting curses. "Just you wait. You think I'll let this go? I'll make you spit out every cent it cost me to raise you. Do you know how much 10 years of meals cost?" Her screeching voice was swallowed by the silence of the bulletproof glass. Chairwoman Seyeon did not let go of Hyunha's hand until they were far from the alley. She stroked the girl's scraped palms and whispered, "It hurts, doesn't it? You've been in so much pain. Mother." For the first time, Hyunha spoke the word aloud. The moment that unfamiliar word, one that had only ever lived in her dreams, escaped her lips, the dam of suppressed sorrow finally broke. "Mother, are you really my mother? Is this a dream?" "Yes, it's me. I am your mother. I am so sorry. Forgive me for leaving you alone for so long." 10. Seyeon pulled Hyunha into her lap, and they wept together. Hyunha's clothes, once soaked with the cold mud of the alley, were now dampened by the warm, healing tears of her mother. But this time, she didn't feel cold. She felt only the radiant warmth of the greatest love in the world. Outside the window, the old slum faded into the distance, replaced by the glittering, magnificent skyline of Seoul. From this moment on, Hyunha's life would never be the same. There were still so many shadows to clear away, so many whispered secrets waiting to be brought into the light. Why had her father lied, telling her that her mother had passed away? Why had her mother remained a ghost for 20 years? And would Park Jong-sim, a woman whose soul had been blinded by the glint of gold, truly let go so easily? In the heavy, expectant silence that precedes a storm, the limousine carrying mother and daughter glided toward a penthouse in Gangnam. When the doors to the private elevator of Seon Tower opened, Hyunha caught her breath. The sight before her felt like a fragment of a dream, beautiful and surreal. Floors of natural white marble stretched from the entrance to the far reaches of the living room, polished to a mirror-like shine. A magnificent chandelier hung from the soaring ceiling, casting a warm, shimmering glow from hundreds of delicate crystals. Paintings by world-renowned artists adorned the walls, and ancient artifacts that belonged in a museum stood in quiet alcoves. To Hyunha, who had spent her life within walls damp with mold and on floors chilled by poverty, this was a world far too vast and breathtaking to comprehend. Hyunha hesitated at the threshold, looking down at her old sneakers, caked in the mud of the alley. She felt as though stepping onto such pristine splendor would be a transgression. Hyunha, what are you doing, sweetheart? Please, come in. Chairwoman Seon placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder, guiding her forward. She knelt down and personally removed Hyunha's soiled shoes, replacing them with a pair of soft, velvet slippers. Is this your home, mother? It is. And from this moment on, it is our home. As Hyunha sat on a plush sofa in the living room, a maid appeared with a tray of fragrant herbal tea and warm, golden pastries. Hyunha cradled the porcelain cup in both hands. The warmth radiating through her fingertips began to thaw her frozen spirit. Across from her, Chairwoman Seon sat watching her daughter's face, her eyes filled with 20 years of suppressed longing and a love deeper than the sea. Mother, please, tell me now, Hyunha said softly. It was time to ask the question that had lived in her heart, as both a curiosity and a fear. Why did father tell me you were dead? And why didn't you come looking for us in all these 20 years? Hyunha's voice trembled. In a hidden corner of her heart, she still feared the answer. Did she abandon us? Did father hate her so much that he hid her away? Chairwoman Seon set her tea down and let out a long, heavy sigh. She looked out at the velvet night beyond the window, her eyes clouded with the pain of a memory from 20 years ago. Hyunha, your grandfather, my father, was a very formidable man. The founder of Seon Group was a man of cold stone, a ruthless figure who manipulated the world of Korean commerce like a master of marionettes. To him, children were not beings to be loved, but tools to be used for the expansion of his empire. My parents wanted me to enter a political marriage to strengthen the conglomerate's power. But instead, I fell in love with a construction worker who had nothing but the clothes on his back. Ozid. In her early 20s, Seyeon had escaped the stifling cage of her family and met a kind, warm-hearted young man named Lee Ki-cheol. Though he lacked wealth, he was the only person who loved Seyeon for who she truly was. They loved each other passionately in secret, and the precious fruit of that love was Hyunha. But eventually, my parents found us. Seyeon's voice dropped to a whisper. My father was incandescent with rage. He said he would not allow me to carry the blood of a commoner in my veins. He demanded I end the pregnancy immediately and leave Ki-cheol forever. When Seyeon refused, her father took desperate measures. One night, a group of burly men raided Ki-cheol's small rented room. They beat him mercilessly and attempted to drag the heavily pregnant Seyeon to a hospital to force the procedure. It was your father who saved me. Though he was covered in blood, Ki-cheol found a desperate, superhuman strength to fight off the men and flee with Seyeon. They ran through the pouring rain, but with Seyeon so close to her due date, they could not go far. That night, hiding in a cramped, derelict room, her labor began. We couldn't go to a hospital. My father had men stationed at every one of them. With only warm water and a few clean towels, Ki-cheol delivered his own daughter with trembling hands. In that humble space, little Hyunha was born, but their joy was short-lived. Outside, the circle of pursuers was closing in. Ki-cheol made a choice. Tears began to track down Seyeon's face. That night, Ki-cheol had cradled the newborn Hyunha and looked at Seyeon with a gaze of absolute resolve. Seyeon, Listen to me carefully, he had said. If the three of us stay together, we will all perish. Your father will never stop searching. Then what do? We should run away together. He's himself. No, I will take the baby and vanish. Kichiol's plan was a shock to her soul. He told her that he would take the child and disappear without a trace, while Se-yeon was to return home alone. He told her to lie to her father, to tell him the baby had died shortly after birth. Only then will you survive, he told me. And only then will our child live. I will spend my life in hiding, risking everything to protect our daughter. I wept and begged him not to do it, but Kichol was unyielding. Just before the pursuers broke down the door, Kichol took the tiny, fragile Hyunha and vanished into the darkness of the night. That was the last time she saw them. Se-yeon was dragged back to her family, where she gave the false report that the child was gone. Her father finally loosened his grip, but Se-yeon spent the next 20 years living in a hell of longing. Your father erased himself from the world to save you, and to protect me. Take now. I believed you were living a good life somewhere, Se-yeon continued. I believed that one day, when your father felt he had the strength, he would return to me with you by his side. But Kicheol never came. He couldn't. He feared that the moment his existence was revealed, Se-yeon's father would once again reach out to harm Hyun-ha, and so he erased his name, his education, and his past, living only as a day laborer named Lee Kichol, moving from one construction site to another. That brilliant young man with a bright future had lived his entire life as a shadow, solely to guard the woman and the daughter he loved. Hyun-ha covered her mouth, her sobs breaking through. He was such a fool. Father was such a fool. Why he had lived such a secluded life. Why he had no friends. Why he was always so anxiously protective of her. All the pieces of the puzzle finally locked together. Her father's poverty had not been a sign of failure. It was a sacrifice more magnificent than anything in the world, a testament to a love that bled. Because he loved you so much, he didn't want to ruin your life. Hyun-ha choked out. That's why he told me you were dead. He was afraid I would try to find you and put us all in danger. Se-yeon pulled Hyun-ha into her arms. I'm so sorry. I was powerless. I couldn't stand up to my father, and I let the two of you live like that. The two women clung to each other, weeping as the misunderstandings and resentment of 20 years melted away in their warm tears. I understand now, Hyun-ha said, her voice thick with emotion, why the name in father's phone was saved as my love. He never forgot you for a single second. Every night, he would look at that phone and remember you. Se-yeon clutched her chest, her heart aching. Kicheol. Oh, I miss you. I miss you so much. Ax, the one who was gone, could not return, but the daughter he had risked everything to save was finally safe in her mother's arms. Mother. Hyun-ha took Se-yeon's hand. It was warm and strong, just like her father's had been. I won't let the life he saved be in vain. I will be happy with you, so that father can look down from heaven and smile when he sees us. Chairwoman Se-yeon wiped her eyes and nodded, her gaze turning firm once more. The time for sorrow was ending. Now was the time for justice for those who had trampled on Kicheol's sacrifice and those who had tormented Hyun-ha. Yes, from now on, I will protect you. I will do it for your father as well. I will do everything in my power, Se-yeon promised herself as she stroked her daughter's hair. At that moment, the work phone on the coffee table rang. Chairwoman, this is the chief secretary. The legal team is ready, and Park Jung-sim has just filed a lawsuit with the court. A cold, razor-sharp smile appeared on Se-yeon's face. Park Jung-sim. It seemed the woman was ready to jump into the fires of hell of her own accord. Hyun-ha, eat something and try to get some sleep. Tomorrow will be a very busy day. Se-yeon reassured her daughter and began preparing to break the silence before the storm. Poverty had driven the man she loved to his death, and greed had tortured her daughter. The relentless vengeance of a woman against a world that had stolen her happiness was now truly beginning. Meanwhile, at a dilapidated commercial building on the outskirts of Seoul, in a second-floor office so old the letters on the sign had half peeled away, Park Jung-sim sat on a sagging sofa, screaming at the top of her lungs. Across from her sat a third-rate lawyer named Mr. Kim, who was picking his ear with a look of boredom. On the desk lay a pile of crumpled bills and yellowed papers. Lawyer, I can't live like this. I'm so angry I can't even sleep. Jung-sim pounded her fist against her thigh. I raised that brat for 10 whole years. I changed her diapers. I cooked her meals. I worked my fingers to the bone to put her through school. It was, of course, a blatant lie. She had never changed a diaper, never cooked a proper meal for Hyunha, and had refused to even give her money for school supplies, leaving the girl to weep on her way to class. But in Jung-sim's twisted memory, she had transformed into the most devoted mother in the world. And now, she finds a rich mother and just runs away without a word. How is that possible? There has to be a limit to such ingratitude. Lawyer Kim pushed his glasses down his nose and tapped at his computer. He was a man like a hyena, possessed of a keen scent for the smell of money. Now, ma'am, just calm down for a moment. My client wishes to file a lawsuit to recover the costs of the child's upbringing and to seek compensation for emotional distress. Is that correct? Yes, exactly that, Park Jong-sim replied, her voice sharp with excitement. I sacrificed my entire youth to raise that girl. Of course I should be repaid. The opponent is the chairwoman of Seon Group, so it won't be easy. But we have nothing to lose, do we? And how much are you planning to demand in damages? Jung-sim's eyes flashed with a cold, hungry greed. She swallowed hard and spread all 5 of her fingers wide. 5 billion won? The lawyer asked. Yes, exactly. 5 billion won. Even Mr. Kim, a lawyer who had seen 1,000 schemes, couldn't help but let out a dry, incredulous laugh. In the history of child support cases in Korea, a demand of 5 billion won was a figure unheard of. Ma'am, even if the opponent is a tycoon, that number is a bit. Why? What's wrong with it? Jung-sim snapped back with practiced audacity. That woman is the chairwoman of Seon Group. Her assets are worth thousands of billions. 5 billion won is just pocket change to her, isn't it? I'll just claim that I paid off all of Hyunha's father's debts myself. That will do it, right? You need evidence. A judge isn't a fool. Words alone won't suffice. At that, Park Jung-sim flashed a triumphant, jagged smile. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. She unfolded it with the reverence one might show a treasure map, revealing a few lines of messy, scrawled handwriting. It was a formal document, a renunciation of parental rights. I, Lee Ki-chul, hereby transfer all parental authority and custody of my daughter, Lee Hyun-ha, to my wife, Park Jong-sim. Below the text was her father's name, followed by a bright red thumbprint. It was, of course, a forgery. Jong-sim had secretly pressed her husband's thumb onto the paper while he was in a deep, drunken sleep, oblivious to the world. She had even scrawled the words herself while he lay beside her. Look at this, she boasted, waving the paper in the air. Before he died, Ki-chul said he would give all rights to Hyun-ha to me. Legally, I am her guardian. With this one piece of paper, even that wealthy chairwoman won't be able to do a thing. Without my permission, she won't be allowed to touch a single hair on Hyun-ha's head. Lawyer Kim took the paper, examining it from every angle. Though it reeked of fraud, he pretended to notice nothing and nodded slowly. As long as he received his fee and the massive commission, if they somehow succeeded, the truth didn't matter to him. Very well. We will proceed with the lawsuit based on this agreement and the fact that you cared for the girl for 10 years. Seon Group's legal team is formidable, but if we stir up public opinion, we still have a chance. Perfect, Jung-sim cackled, already imagining the 5 billion won in her hands. In her heart, there was not a flicker of guilt toward Hyun-ha or her late husband. There was only the glint of money and the delusion that she had finally won the lottery of a lifetime. Meanwhile, at the penthouse in Gangnam, a quiet and warm breakfast was unfolding. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the vast dining table. Hyun-ha carefully took a spoonful of abalone porridge, a delicacy she was tasting for the first time. The rich, nutty aroma of toasted sesame oil rose from the bowl, which had been prepared with the utmost care. This is wonderful. It's truly delicious, Hyun-ha said, her eyes wide with wonder. A satisfied smile touched Se-yeon's lips as she watched her daughter eat. Eat your fill, sweetheart. You've grown far too thin. From now on, you will eat only the best things to help you regain your strength. Iwan. Se-yeon personally flaked the tender meat of a grilled fish and placed it on Hyun-ha's spoon. Hyun-ha felt a lump form in her throat. When she lived with Park Jung-sim, even sitting at the table had been a source of anxiety. She often had to eat standing up in a corner of the kitchen, her rice drowned in cold water and accompanied by a few pieces of sour kimchi. But now, a warm meal, and a mother who deboned her fish for her. This taste, it reminds me of the kimchi stew father used to make. It feels so warm, Hyunha whispered. Yes, your father was a wonderful cook. When I was pregnant with you, he used to make a seaweed soup so delicious I can still remember it perfectly. Mother and daughter shared their quiet memories of the man they both loved, basking in a moment of pure happiness. But the peace was not destined to last. Chairwoman, I apologize for the interruption. Yes. The chief secretary entered the dining room, his face set in a grave expression. In his hand, he held a thick envelope of documents. Seyeon set her tea down, her gaze sharpening. What is it? You look troubled for such an early hour. Certified mail from the court, ma'am. The court? Seyeon took the envelope, her brow furrowing. As she tore it open and scanned the contents, her expression turned as cold as a Siberian winter. The veins on the back of her hand pulsed against the paper. Hyunha set her spoon down, her heart racing. Mother, what happened? Is it bad news? Seyeon took a deep breath, and then slammed the documents onto the table. The lawsuit has arrived. Park Jung-sim. That woman has actually filed a suit. A lawsuit? Her? Park Jung-sim has filed for the reimbursement of upbringing costs and a confirmation of parental authority over Lee Hyun-ha, the chief secretary explained. The suit demands 5 billion won for the past 10 years of care and emotional damages. Furthermore, based on a document allegedly written by the late Lee Ki-shol, she claims to be the legal guardian. She is stating that if we wish to keep you here, we must pay her a fair compensation. And the amount she's asking for? Seyeon's voice was dangerously low. 5 billion won, ma'am. What? 5 billion won? Hyunha cried out in shock. That's impossible. She never spent a single one on me. I had to work part-time jobs just to survive. Tears of frustration welled in her eyes. A woman who never cooked me a decent meal, who only knew how to hit and torment me. She wants money for raising me? And 5 billion won? Besides, that document. Father would never have done that. Her father had loved her more than life itself. There was no way he would have handed her over to that woman. It's a lie. My father couldn't have written that. It's all fake. As Hyunha began to tremble with rage, Seyeon stood up and walked to her side, pulling her into a protective embrace. Stay calm, Hyunha. I know it is all a blatant, hollow lie, Seyeon whispered, her eyes flashing with a lethal brilliance. She took the lawsuit and crumpled it in her hand as if she were tearing the woman herself apart. 5 billion won. She certainly set a high price for my daughter. To dare open her mouth for money in front of me. Mother, what do we do? She's obsessed with money. There's no telling what she'll do. All that talk about father's debt is made up too. What if the court believes her? Hyunha was terrified. This was her first encounter with the law, with the world of lawsuits and judges, and she knew the cruelty of Park Jung-sim better than anyone. But Chairwoman Seyeon remained calm. In fact, she seemed to almost welcome the situation, a shadow of a ruthless smile playing on her lips. She turned to the chief secretary and gave her orders with surgical precision. Secretary, our internal legal team will not be enough. Assemble a team from the finest firm in the country, the most expensive, the most relentless lawyers in Korea. I understand, ma'am. I will see to it immediately. If she wants money, I can give it to her. What is my wealth for, if not this? 5 billion won is nothing, Seyeon said, stroking Hyunha's hair gently. But the words that followed were a declaration of war more terrifying than any curse. But the place where she will spend that money will not be a shopping mall. It will be the cold stone floor of a prison cell. Seyeon had been preparing to dismantle Park Jung-sim's life long before the papers arrived. She had already mobilized the best intelligence networks in the country to dig into the woman's past. Hyunha, do not worry. Have you forgotten who I am? I will show that woman exactly why they call me the Ice Witch in the business world. In her private office, a thick black folder sat waiting on the desk, containing the entire sordid history of Park Jung-sim. Inside were secrets so dark and repulsive the woman could never imagine they had been found. Insurance fraud, habitual gambling, and even the suspicious deaths of her previous husbands. The 5 billion won stone the stepmother had thrown had landed directly in the lion's den. This would no longer be a mere court case. It would be a platform for her execution. Se-yeon took Hyun-ha's hand and made a silent vow. An eye for an eye, a life for a life. For every tear you shed, she will pay with a drop of her own blood. An atmosphere of war settled over the penthouse. The fury of a mother protecting her child was about to collide head-on with the greed of a woman chasing gold. In Chairwoman Se-yeon's office, the tension was absolute. Like a command center during a war, the air was so heavy that no one dared to breathe too loudly. 5 of the most prominent lawyers in Korea stood in a disciplined line before her desk. They were not mere legal experts. They were living weapons of the Seon Empire, forged by money and power. Before them lay the black folder that dissected the life of Park Jong-sim. "Is this the extent of the investigation?" Se-yeon asked, her voice cold as she adjusted her glasses. The lead lawyer bowed deeply. "Yes, Chairwoman. The more we investigated, the more shocked we became. Park Jung-sim's past goes far beyond anything we imagined. She is not just a cruel stepmother. Explain. She is a professional hunter." Entered. As the lawyer opened the file, the hideous face of Park Jung-sim began to emerge. She had been married twice before, but the startling truth was that both husbands had died mysteriously, or from sudden illnesses shortly after their weddings. And each time, Jung-sim had vanished with a massive life insurance payout. Insurance fraud, gambling, and even signs of severe child abuse were etched into her history. Se-yeon flipped through the records of Hyun-ha's childhood, her hands trembling with a suppressed rage. There, the hellish days Hyun-ha had endured were recorded in agonizing detail. A teacher's notes mentioned that in elementary school, Hyun-ha had been forced to drink tap water to stave off hunger because she had no money for lunch. Medical records detailed a time in the middle of winter when Jung-sim had turned off the heat to save money, causing a tiny Hyun-ha to be hospitalized with severe frostbite. It was worse than she had imagined. Not only had Park Jung-sim neglected her, but she had also stolen every bit of Hyun-ha's basic government assistance and scholarships, pouring the money into the flickering lights of the casinos. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, was treated like this? Se-yeon's voice broke with a jagged, suppressed fury. Her heart felt as though it were being torn into pieces. While she had lived in luxury, draped in silk and fine jewels, her child had been treated worse than an animal by a woman whose soul was void of mercy. "This creature is not human," Se-yeon whispered, closing the folder with a sharp final click. "She must be permanently excised from society. A mere fine is not enough. I want the maximum sentence the law allows. Ensure she never sees the sun again." "I understand, Chairwoman," the lead lawyer replied. "And there is one more thing, regarding the renunciation of parental rights that she submitted as her decisive evidence." He handed her a tablet, a triumphant smile touching his lips. On the screen was the official report from the National Forensic Service. The handwriting analysis confirms it is 100% a forgery. The signature, the pressure of the pen, and the style of the letters are entirely different from the late Lee Ki-cheol's usual hand. More importantly, the analysis of the thumbprint shows it was forced onto the paper while the victim was unconscious. A lethal brilliance flashed in Se-yeon's eyes. This was not simple fraud. It was a heinous crime manipulating the will of the dead to drag the living into hell. Good. Add forgery of documents and attempted fraud to the list. I want her stripped of everything she has. We have coordinated with the prosecution, the lawyer added. We plan to carry out the arrest on the spot during tomorrow's mediation session. Se-yeon stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the magnificent night view of Seoul. Ki-cheol, are you watching? Watch how I break the woman who tormented you and made our daughter cry. In the reflection of the glass, there was no trace of mercy on her face, only the icy, unbreakable resolve of a goddess of justice. A few days later, in the mediation room of the Seoul Central District Court, Park Jung-sim sat with her legs crossed arrogantly. She wore a garish leopard print coat and clutched a fake designer handbag. Beside her, the third-rate lawyer, Mr. Kim, sat mopping sweat from his brow. "Goodness, why are they taking so long?" Jung-sim muttered, snapping her gum. "They probably ran away out of fear." Her mind was already overflowing with happy fantasies of how she would spend 50 billion won, a luxury apartment in Gangnam, a new car, paying off her gambling debts. She truly believed she was on the verge of a brand new life. At that moment, the door opened, and Chairwoman Kang Se-yeon entered. Behind her came Hyun-ha and 5 elite lawyers in black suits, standing like an impenetrable wall. Se-yeon's presence alone was overwhelming. Even in her simple attire, The aura of authority radiating from her instantly withered Jung Sim's bravado. "Oh, the chairwoman has arrived," Jung Sim said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You're late. Is the money ready? You know I raised our Hyun-ha with all my heart, as if she were my own daughter. 50 billion won is a bargain, really." Jung Sim reached out a hand, a greedy, shameless smile on her face. Hyun-ha was so revolted by the act that she had to look away. Se-yeon didn't even sit down. She simply stared down at the woman with a chilling, silent disdain. Then, she slid a thick envelope across the table. Slide. It stopped right in front of Jung Sim's nose. "What's this? The settlement check?" Jung Sim picked it up eagerly, but the moment she opened it, the smile vanished. Inside were not checks, but the dark stains of her own past, lists of gambling debts, records of insurance payouts from her previous husbands, evidence of her abuse toward Hyun-ha, and the forensic report proving the custody document was a fraud. What is this?" Jung Sim's hands began to shake violently. The papers fluttered to the floor like dying leaves. "Raised her like your own daughter?" Se-yeon's voice was a cold, sharp blade. "The evidence of how you starved her, beat her, and threw her out into the cold is all right here. No, it's not true. These are all lies. Lies? Your gambling debts alone total over 1 billion won. You stole her assistance money to waste at the tables, and you dare to ask for 50 billion for her upbringing?" Se-yeon slammed her hand onto the table. The sound was so loud it made everyone in the room jump. "You have a vivid imagination. You won't get a single cent. Instead, you will vomit up everything you embezzled and spend the rest of your life in a cage." End quote. Jung Sim turned pale and looked at her lawyer. "Lawyer Kim, say something. Tell them it's all lies." But Lawyer Kim was already quietly packing his things. From the moment he realized his opponent was the legal team of the Se-yeon Group, he knew this was a war he could never win. "Look, if these documents are real, I can't help you. I'm withdrawing from this case." "Even you?" Jung Sim shrieked like a cornered rat. She lunged toward Hyun-ha. "Hyun-ha, say something. How did I treat you? We were so good together. Did I ever let you go hungry?" Hyun-ha looked Park Jung Sim directly in the eyes. In the past, she would have trembled in fear, but things were different now. She had her mother by her side, and she had found her own strength. "Ma'am," Hyun-ha said, her voice calm and unwavering. "Please do not call me your daughter. That is a word you do not deserve to utter. Oh, you ungrateful brat. I raised a viper in my own home." "Asper." Jung Sim raised her hand to strike Hyun-ha's cheek, but before she could move, click. The door to the mediation room burst open, and uniformed police officers swarmed inside. "Park Jung Sim, you are under emergency arrest for document forgery, attempted fraud, violation of child welfare laws, and embezzlement." The officers snapped the handcuffs onto her wrists. The cold sound of the metal broke the silence of the room. "Let me go. Do you know who I am? I've been framed. This is all a conspiracy." Jung Sim screamed and flailed her limbs like a trapped animal. But the officers remained unmoved, dragging her toward the exit. "Call my lawyer. My money. My 50 billion. Even as she was led away, she shrieked about the money until her voice faded down the hall. It was the wretched end of a woman who had turned into a monster through blind greed. Se-yeon watched the scene until the very end, her heart feeling the sweet relief of a 20-year burden finally being lifted. "Mother," Hyun-ha whispered. Se-yeon wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulder and smiled gently. "This is only the beginning, sweetheart. Your father's memory deserves justice as well. I will handle everything." But she knew the truth was deeper. The sins of Park Jung Sim were not limited to the abuse. The dark secret behind her father's death still lingered. "Come. Next is the insurance company." Se-yeon's gaze turned sharp once more. The final lifeline, Park Jung Sim was counting on the life insurance policy on Ki Cheol. It was time for that lifeline to become the noose that would finish her. The two women left the court with their heads held high. Behind them, Jung Sim's screams died away, and a new era of justice awaited. A short time later, having been released from temporary custody due to a legal loophole, Park Jung Sim was boiling with rage. She had been arrested for forgery, but she had shamelessly denied everything, claiming she was a victim of a misunderstanding. Despite having no money for a top lawyer, she had exploited a gap in the system to gain temporary bail before her indictment. The moment she stepped out of the police station gates, she spat on the ground. "Curse them all. Just you wait. You think I'll give up this easily?" Her eyes were bloodshot and filled with a predatory light, like a starving wolf. Even though she had been crushed by the mountain that was Kangseon, she still had one final fortress, one last string of hope. It was the massive life insurance policy she had secretly taken out on Hyunha's father. Yes, that money will be enough, she thought. 500 million. No, with the accidental death clause, it should be 600 million won. Jung Sim pulled the crumpled insurance policy from her coat and kissed it. Even when she couldn't pay the rent, even when the rice jar was empty, she had gritted her teeth to pay the premiums on this policy. She had prayed fervently for the day her husband would die so that this rain of gold would fall upon her. Once I have that money, I'll hire the most expensive lawyer and flee the country. You think you can catch me? Jeong Sim hailed a taxi and headed straight for the headquarters of the insurance company. Her mind was already filled with fantasies, paying off her debts, buying designer bags, and sipping cocktails on the beaches of Guam or Hawaii. She even hummed a little tune. The insurance company's massive glass building stood on Tehran Road. Jung Sim pushed through the revolving doors and marched inside. When she reached the counter, she slammed down the death certificate and the policy. Here, I've come to claim my husband's life insurance. Process it quickly. I'm a very busy woman. The clerk glanced at her and began typing on the keyboard. Yes, ma'am. Please wait a moment. Oh, the clerk's fingers stopped. Her eyes scanned the screen, her expression turning troubled. What is it? I brought all the paperwork. Give me the money, Jung Sim demanded, pounding on the counter. The clerk cleared her throat awkwardly. Ma'am, I'm very sorry, but this policy cannot be paid out at this time. What? Cannot be paid? What on earth are you talking about? Jung Sim's voice rose to a shriek. I've paid those premiums for 10 years without missing a single day. Give me my money. It's not that, ma'am. The system shows a payment suspension code. This case is being directly managed by the head office's audit team. Audit? You're all scammers. You're just trying to cheat me out of my money. Jung Sim began to cause a massive scene. Security guards rushed over as other customers frowned at the noise, but she didn't care. Just then, a man in a well-tailored suit approached her. His name tag identified him as the branch manager. Are you Mrs. Park Jung Sim? Please, come this way. We will assist you in our private VIP lounge, ma'am. It's about time you showed some respect, Park Jung Sim muttered, smoothing her garish clothes and tilting her chin upward. She walked with a smug swagger, convinced that in this world, the loudest voice always won the prize. But the moment the heavy doors to the VIP lounge swung open, her footsteps faltered. There, sitting in the high-backed velvet chair and elegantly sipping a cup of coffee, was the one person she never wanted to see again, a person who felt more like a phantom of judgment than a woman. Chairwoman Kang Seon. Behind her stood Hyunha, her face pale and etched with sorrow, while burly security guards with obsidian eyes blocked the exit. We meet again, Mrs. Park, Seon said, setting her cup down with a soft, chilling clink. She offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a smile as cold as a winter moon. Jung Sim turned white, her bravado evaporating. You, why are you here? Didn't you know? This insurance company is a subsidiary of the Seon Group. I am the primary shareholder. What? Jung Sim's legs began to shake. Of all the companies in Korea, why did it have to be this one? She screamed internally. Out of thousands of insurers, she had walked straight into the lion's own den. It means that without my signature, not a single penny leaves this building, Seon continued, her voice a calm, lethal whisper. So, it is time to wake up from your little dream. Faced with this cold decree, Jung Sim nearly collapsed, but her obsession with wealth fought back against her terror. She shrieked, her voice cracking. This is illegal. This is a policy I paid for with my own money. You think being a chairwoman makes you God? I'll report this to the Financial Supervisory Service. Legal? Seyon picked up a thick folder from the table and scattered the contents, photographs, and medical records before Jeong Sim's bulging eyes. Can you still say that after looking at these? Jung Sim's gaze froze as she scanned the images. They were photos of the medicine bottles her husband, Lee Ki-cheol, had used during his life, placed alongside the autopsy report from the National Forensic Service. Those vitamins you gave him every night, Seyon said, her eyes flashing with a predatory brilliance. She leaned forward, cutting off Jung Sim's air. They weren't vitamins at all. It was a high-concentration ephedrine compound, a drug known to cause sudden, catastrophic spikes in blood pressure. I'm settled. Jung Sim's mouth hung open, but no sound came out. Hyunha's father had suffered from severe hypertension. His doctors had warned him repeatedly that he needed absolute rest and strict blood pressure management. Yet, Park Jung-sim had deceived him, claiming the pills were health supplements from abroad. She had fed him a slow-acting poison for months. There was even evidence that on the very morning of his accident, she had crushed a double dose of the pills into his breakfast soup. The result was inevitable: a sudden, dizzy spell and symptoms of a cerebral hemorrhage while he was at the construction site. He had lost his balance and fallen to his death. This was not an accident. Seon's voice echoed like a funeral bell through the lounge. This was a calculated, cold-blooded murder. Hyunha covered her mouth, her sobs echoing in the room. Father, every time you took those, you said you had a headache. I never knew it was poison. You said they were a gift from her, and you smiled as you took them. He had believed the pills were a sign of his wife's affection, never imagining they were the very thing dragging him into the grave. No, that's not possible. I thought they were good for him. Someone told me they were for weight loss, Jung-sim stammered, her words tumbling over each other in a frantic, guilty mess. And why? Seon asked, waving her hand as if dismissing a fly. Would you give weight loss pills to a man with high blood pressure, especially after taking out a 600 million won life insurance policy on him? Seon stood up, her aura suffocating. You will not receive a single cent. Instead, the charge of murder will be added to your crimes. This won't end with a few years for forgery. You are looking at life in prison, or worse. End quote. On Seon's signal, detectives who had been waiting in the wings swarmed into the room. These were not civil officers. They were veteran homicide investigators. They moved in and snapped handcuffs onto Jung-sim's wrists with a final, metallic click. Park Jung-sim, you are under emergency arrest for murder and violation of the special law on insurance fraud prevention. No, my money, my 500 million, Jung-sim screamed as the detectives dragged her away. Even as her life crumbled, she grieved for the lost fortune more than she had ever grieved for her husband. It was a wretched, repulsive end for a woman who had allowed greed to devour her humanity. Hyunha, do you see? That creature stole your father from us, Seon said, pulling her daughter into her arms. Hyunha stared at the door where the woman had vanished, her tears feeling like drops of blood. I will never forgive her. Never. Give my father back. Give him back. Trest. Her cries filled the room. The realization that her father had been betrayed by the person he trusted most, tearing her heart anew. Seon stroked the girl's hair and whispered, It's over now. I have returned his justice to him. That woman will never leave prison as long as she lives. But even this was not the end. A hell deeper than any prison, a punishment that would haunt Park Jung-sim every day for the rest of her life, was already being prepared. Seon had moved to the next phase of her plan. Even in a cell, the debts and the price of her sins would follow her to the very end. Come, Hyunha. Let's go to your father and tell him he can finally rest in peace. Seon guided the exhausted girl out into the bright morning. The sky had cleared, but inside their hearts, the rain still fell. Yet, they were no longer alone. They had each other to soothe the pain. Meanwhile, as Park Jung-sim sat shivering on the cold floor of a detention cell, her old home in the cramped slum was in a state of chaos once again. This time, it was not the police or luxury cars. 2 black vans screeched to a halt in front of the gate, and a group of rough-looking men poured out. They carried red seizure notices and stacks of unpaid debt documents. They kicked the rusted iron gate violently, making sure the neighbors could see everything. Where is Park Jung-sim? Tell her to pay up. The gate groaned as if it were about to collapse, but the house remained silent. The owner was busy facing the walls of a jail cell, but the debt collectors didn't care. You think hiding will save you? Break the door down. They smashed through the lock and swarmed into the yard. In the corner, the discarded remains of Hyunha's life still lay in the dirt. Do you have any idea how much interest you owe? If we don't get our money today, we're taking every brick of this house, the leader of the group shouted, spitting on the porch. These were notorious illegal moneylenders, whom Jung-sim had approached to fund her lawsuit against Seon. She had bragged to them that when she won her 50 billion won settlement, she would pay them back 10 times over. But the moment news of her arrest broke, they had descended like hyenas to claim their pound of flesh. Boss, No one's here. The place is empty, a subordinate said, emerging from the house. What? Did she run? No. They said she's in jail. Fine. Then search for any hidden cash. Rip the cupboards out. Tear down the ceiling. Crash. They began to destroy the interior of the house with reckless abandon. The television was smashed on the floor. The wardrobe doors were ripped from their hinges. Neighbors watched from behind their curtains, too terrified to intervene. The men plastered red seizure stickers on the refrigerator, the washing machine, even the individual rice bowls. Gather anything worth a penny. We're putting this hovel up for auction immediately. The leader was about to light a cigarette when the low, smooth hum of a luxury sedan echoed from the end of the alley. Every eye turned. A black Mercedes glided to a halt in front of the wreckage of the yard. The man who stepped out of the driver's seat was dressed in a sharp, impeccable suit. It was Se-yeon's chief secretary. He strode into the dusty yard, his calm presence instantly silencing the rowdy collectors. "What are you doing here?" the secretary asked, his voice quiet but heavy with authority. The leader stepped forward, trying to look intimidating. We're here for our money. Who are you? What are you to that woman? The money. You mean the amount, Mrs. Park Jung-sim borrowed. That's right. 100 million won in principal. And with interest, it's 300 million. If you aren't here to pay it for her, get lost. The leader slapped his palm against his folder. Without blinking, the secretary reached into his coat and produced an envelope. I am aware of the amount. We are buying this debt. What? The leader's eyes went wide. The secretary pulled out a bank check and showed it to him. It was a certified check for exactly 300 million won. The collector's eyes lit up with greed. They had been terrified of losing their money because of Jung-sim's arrest. And now, someone had arrived to hand it to them on a silver platter. Are you serious? Who are you? Her secret lover or something? That is not for you to know, the secretary replied. Sign the debt transfer papers and leave this house immediately. 1. The leader snatched the check, verifying its authenticity. It's real. Good heavens. It's a miracle. All right, boys, pack it up. We're done here. The moneylenders vanished as quickly as they had arrived, caring nothing for the destruction they left behind as long as their pockets were full. Once they were gone, the secretary stood alone in the ruins of the yard. He looked around at the broken home and then placed a call. Yes, chairwoman. It has been handled. The debt is ours. Going. Now. Every single debt that Park Jung-sim owed had been gathered into the hands of the chairwoman. On the other end of the line, Kang Se-yeon's voice sounded cold and resolute. You have worked hard, secretary. Secure the house so that no one may enter or leave, and prepare yourself. We are going to pay her a visit. Chairwoman Se-yeon had quietly purchased every last debt Park Jung-sim had left behind in the world. It was not an act of mercy. It was the forging of an eternal shackle, a weight that would hang around the woman's neck even if she left prison, and even if she departed this world for the next. A few hours later, in the visiting room of the Seoul Detention Center, Park Jung-sim sat in a state of utter ruin, dressed in the dull uniform of a prisoner. Her face was sallow without makeup, and her hair was a tangled mess. She still did not fully grasp the gravity of her situation, screaming for a lawyer until the guards were forced to restrain her. Just you wait. Once I get that 500 million won in insurance money, I'm getting out of here, she muttered, clinging to a hollow, fleeting hope. Even though the evidence of her fraud had been laid bare, she wanted to believe there was still a way to talk her way out. At that moment, the door opened and Chairwoman Se-yeon entered. She wore an elegant silk blouse and took her seat with a quiet, regal grace. Separated by a transparent acrylic wall, it looked as though heaven and hell were facing one another. You! Why are you here? Did you come to mock me? Jung-sim hissed through clenched teeth. Instead of answering, Se-yeon pressed a document against the glass. It was the debt transfer certificate she had received from the moneylenders. What? What is this? Jung-sim squinted at the paper. All rights to the total debt of the debtor, Park Jung-sim, are hereby transferred to Kang Se-yeon. Jung-sim's eyes shook as if an earthquake were tearing through her soul. You borrowed money from those men, didn't you? 300 million won, Se-yeon said softly. I have bought that debt in its entirety. Your creditor is no longer those thugs. It is I. Do you understand what that means? Whether you spend 10 years or 20 years in this place, the day you walk out, you will not find freedom. You will find a mountain of debt waiting to crush you. Jungsim felt the air leave her lungs. The moneylenders would have vanished once they were paid, but Seon's goal was not money. She intended to drain every last drop of peace from Jungsim's spirit. I will calculate every bit of legal interest for you. While you sit in your cell, the interest will grow like a rolling snowball. Do you think you can pay it back? I will confiscate every cent of the meager wages you earn from prison labor. You will be my slave until the day you die. Jungsim collapsed onto the floor. Every hope had vanished. Even if she were released, she would have no home, no money, and nowhere to go. The phantom of wealth she had chased her entire life had finally dragged her into a permanent abyss. Oh, and one more thing, Seon said, rising to her feet. The house in the slum where you lived has been sold at auction, and I have purchased it. It will be demolished shortly. Every trace of your existence will be erased from this world. No, that's my house. That's everything I have. Jungsim's screams echoed through the visiting room, but Seon did not look back. As the heavy iron door slammed shut, Jungsim was led back to her dark cell, left with nothing but the cold cement floor and a debt she could never repay. Seon's footsteps were heavy as she returned home, but her heart felt lighter, as if a great duty had been fulfilled. When she entered the penthouse, a soft light was glowing from Hyunha's room. She opened the door gently. Hyunha was sitting at her desk, cradling the old 2G flip phone. Hyunha, sweetheart, why aren't you sleeping? Seon asked softly. Hyunha turned around, her eyes shimmering with tears. Mother, she sobbed, holding out the phone. I kept it on the charger, and it finally turned on. I found the notes section. Notes? Seon sat beside her daughter and looked at the small, grainy screen. There, hundreds of unsent text messages were saved. They were letters from Ki Cheol that he had never found the courage to send. Every ounce of longing and love he had swallowed alone over 20 long years was contained within that tiny machine. Seon, today our daughter, Hyunha, started the first grade. The way she looked in her backpack reminded me so much of you that I sat and cried for a long time. The moment she read the first message, Seon's tears began to fall. I hurt my back at the construction site today. I found myself missing the way you used to rub my back. Are you living well? You must forget someone like me and live a magnificent life. Seon, I saw you on the news. You've become a chairwoman? I am so proud of you. Even from afar, I will pray for your happiness. I will risk my life to raise our daughter well. When we meet again in the next life, please forgive me then. Forgive me for leaving you. Seon's hands shook violently as she scrolled through the words. He had never forgotten her, not for a single second, until his final breath. Every night, after dragging his exhausted body home from the site, he had sat before this small screen to talk to the woman he couldn't touch. But because he feared his humble life would be a burden to her success, he had written and then deleted, never pressing the send button. You fool, you beautiful fool, Seon sobbed, clutching the phone to her chest. Why didn't you call? Why didn't you come to me? I would have thrown away all the money and fame just to be with you. Why did you have to suffer all alone? Hyunha leaned against her mother's shoulder. He loved you so much, mother. That's why he hid. In the quiet room, the soft, pale glow of the old phone illuminated their tears. It was the greatest legacy he could have left behind, a proof of an eternal, unchanging love. That night, they sat together, reading his letters over and over. Though his body was gone, his love felt alive and present beside them. From that ancient 2G screen, voices from across 20 years of time continued to flow. They were not just text messages. They were blood-stained confessions of a poor, humble father. March 2nd, 2015. Seon. Today, our Hyunha started middle school. Seeing her in her uniform, she looked exactly like you when you were young. I hid behind a wall at the school and watched her for a long time. I wanted to take a photo of her at the gate, but my work clothes were so dirty. I was afraid she would be embarrassed, so I didn't step out. I'm sorry. If you had been there, she would have felt so confident. Father, I was never embarrassed, Hyunha whispered, stroking the screen. You weren't dirty at all. She felt a pang of regret, remembering how she had wondered that day why her father hadn't come to take a picture with her friends. All the while, he had been hiding behind a fence, his heart full of pride, recording the image of his daughter in his mind. December 24th, 2018. Merry Christmas, Seon. I saw you on television today. You received a business award? Congratulations, my love. You looked so radiant and beautiful. I'm so glad you are living such a grand life that you probably don't even remember someone like me. But why do my tears keep falling? That handsome man standing next to you must be your husband. You look good together. I wish you happiness. I will live well with Hyun-ha too. Seyeon clutched her chest. Oh, you fool. You absolute fool. The man in the news had only been a business partner. For 20 years, Seyeon had never let anyone close to her. He had lived in a world of his own misunderstandings, never knowing that she had spent every single night waiting for him, and him alone. November 2023. The final note was written during a lunch break at the construction site, just a day before he passed away. Seyeon, my body feels strange lately. My head aches like a hammer is hitting it, and my hands won't stop shaking. I've been taking the medicine Jung Sim gives me, but it doesn't seem to help at all. Hyun-ha clenched her fists. It was the poison. Her father had been fading away without ever knowing that the woman he trusted was destroying him. Tomorrow is Hyun-ha's birthday. I want to go to the mall and buy her a beautiful padded jacket this time. I'm sorry I've always made her wear cheap clothes from the market. I'll use this month's overtime pay to buy her the most expensive one I can find. Seyeon, if something should happen to me, our Hyun-ha, could you look after her? I know this is a shameless request, but she is more precious than my life, and I have no one else in this world I can trust but you. I will give her your number. I beg you, please do not turn her away. It was a final testament. The father, sensing the shadow of death, had used his last ounce of strength to send a signal for his daughter's survival. Even if he couldn't press the button, he had left the letter with the desperate prayer that one day the phone would find its way to her. He knew, Hyun-ha said, her voice thick with emotion. He believed that you hadn't changed your number. He believed that you still loved him. That's why he sent me to you. Seyeon pulled Hyun-ha into a tight embrace. Her eyes were no longer just filled with sorrow, but with a quiet, powerful light. Yes, we believed in each other. Even after 20 years, we were still waiting. Kicheol, I will protect Hyun-ha just as you wished. Even if I must sacrifice my own life, I will ensure our daughter is happy. Though they could not meet again in this world, the love between the two was miraculously woven together through Hyun-ha. The battery of the old second-generation flip phone finally faded, and the screen went dark. But the warmth of the love it contained had become an eternal flame in the hearts of the mother and daughter, a light that would never be extinguished. The following morning, Chairwoman Seyeon was busy from the earliest hours. Her eyes were still swollen from the night of weeping, but her expression was more radiant and determined than ever before. Hyun-ha, wake up, sweetheart. There is somewhere we must go today. Where are we going, mother? Is it back to the court? No, Seyeon replied softly. Today is the day we fulfill your father's final wish. Seyeon helped Hyun-ha into her finest luxury sedan and drove toward the largest department store in the heart of Seoul. As the car glided into the VIP parking bay, the branch manager and a line of staff stood ready to bow in greeting. This was, after all, a flagship store of the Seyeon Group. Chairwoman, it is an honor to welcome you. Please allow us to escort you to the VIP lounge. That won't be necessary, Seyeon said firmly. Take us directly to the floor for young women's fashion. Seyeon took Hyun-ha's hand as they stepped onto the escalator. The brilliant lights and the rows of elegant displays made Hyun-ha's head spin. For a girl who had known only local markets or searching for the cheapest deals online, the department store felt like a different universe. Seyeon stopped in front of a famous designer outdoor boutique. She pointed to a long, snow-white padded jacket displayed on a mannequin. This would suit you perfectly, Hyun-ha. Why don't you try it on? Mother, look at the price. It's over 1 million won. That's far too expensive. I prefer my comfortable clothes anyway. Hyun-ha waved her hands, stepping back in a panic. The 50,000 won jacket her father had bought her was a treasure she wore with infinite gratitude. This felt like an impossible luxury. Seyeon took her daughter's shoulders and looked deep into her eyes. Hyun-ha, I am not the one buying this for you. What do you mean? It's your father. It was he who wanted so desperately to buy this for you. He bought this with every ounce of his heart, through all those nights of overtime labor and the sweat of his brow. Seyeon's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. What he couldn't finish for you, I will fulfill with interest. So please, do not refuse. Put it on, and feel your father's love wrapping around you. Hearing those words, Hyunha nodded slowly. As she slipped into the white jacket and stood before the mirror, she felt a profound sense of peace. It felt as though her father were standing right behind her, holding her in a warm, protective embrace. It looks beautiful. My daughter is truly stunning. Seyeon smiled and handed her black card to the clerk. Wrap this for us. In fact, I'll take one of every new style displayed here. And then, we shall look at shoes and handbags. That day, Seyeon shopped with a passion that felt as if she wanted to buy the entire store for her child. It wasn't mere extravagance. It was a ritual. She was pouring out everything she hadn't been able to do for 20 years, everything the girl's father had yearned to provide. When they returned home, their hands full of shopping bags, Hyunha let out a small cry of joy as she laid her new things on the bed. But the gift that moved her the most was yet to come. After dinner, Seyeon handed her a simple white envelope. What is this, mother? Open it and see. Hyunha carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a university acceptance letter and a tuition receipt. It was for the Department of Food and Nutrition, the very program she had been forced to give up on, despite being accepted, because they had no money. Mother, how did you know? I spoke with the university. Luckily, the registration period had not yet passed. I've already paid for all 4 years of your tuition. Your father was right, wasn't he? He said our daughter was brilliant and wanted so much to learn. He wrote about it in his notes. He was so proud of you for getting in, and his heart broke when you lied and said you didn't want to go just to save him money. I cried all night reading those words. Hyunha, I promised myself I would protect your dreams. From now on, never worry about money. Just study. Become whoever you want to be. Hyunha clutched the letter to her chest and sobbed. Mother, I will work so hard. I will be a daughter my father can be proud of. I want to become a nutritionist and cook healthy, delicious meals for people who struggle just like he did. You are already our pride, sweetheart, Seyeon whispered, pulling her into a warm embrace. Outside the window, the long, bitter winter was finally drawing to a close. A gentle warmth began to stir in the wind, a sign that spring was not far away. The daughter her father had risked his life to protect was finally taking flight in the arms of her mother. Even if he was no longer there to see it, the love he left behind would be the steady wind at her back. Tomorrow, let's visit your father, Seyeon said. We shall wear our beautiful new clothes and show him your acceptance letter. Yes, mother. And I will make the tuna kimbap he loved so much. The two women looked at each other and shared a bright, hopeful smile. A smile that seemed to mirror the one their father held in heaven. The darkness had truly vanished, and the golden sunlight had finally begun to shine upon their lives. The unusually harsh winter passed, and a warm spring day arrived as if it were a beautiful dream. Chairwoman Seyeon and Hyunha had been busy since dawn, for today was a very special day. In the kitchen, the savory aroma of toasted sesame oil filled the air. Usually, they would eat a breakfast prepared by a private chef, but today, Seyeon had personally tied on an apron to roll kimbap. Mother, you have to add more tuna. Father loved it when they were stuffed with tuna. I know. But if I add any more, the rolls will burst. It's okay if they burst, as long as they taste good, Hyunha chirped, peeling boiled eggs at the counter. The shadows of the past winter had completely vanished from her face. She looked as vibrant as a yellow rapeseed flower in full bloom. They carefully packed a picnic basket with the rolls, a bottle of soju, and a new set of clothes for her father before leaving the house. Instead of the black limousine, they decided to take a white vehicle, with Seyeon herself behind the wheel. They wanted this time to belong only to the three of them. Outside the window, cherry blossom petals fluttered through the air like warm snow. At a quiet memorial park in Gyeonggi Province, under the brilliant, pouring sunlight, lay the grave of Lee Ki-cheol. The headstone was engraved with the words, "The resting place of a beloved husband and father, Lee Ki-cheol." A few days prior, Seyeon had replaced the old wooden marker with a headstone of the finest white marble. Ki-cheol, I'm here. Our Hyunha is here too. Seyeon spread a blanket before the grave and laid out the food tuna kimbap, glass noodles, and the warm beef and radish soup he had loved so much. Beside the steaming food was a photograph of a younger Ki-cheol, smiling brightly as if to say, "Come, sit. I've been waiting." Hyunha wiped the frame of the photo with her sleeve, her eyes red. "Father, I'm here. I came with Mother." Her throat tightened, and she sat in silence for a moment, before placing the white envelope on the marble. I'm a college student now. I was accepted into the Department of Food and Nutrition. A gentle breeze swept over the grave, rustling the grass. Mother is letting me go to school, and she buys me so many delicious things. I'm never hungry anymore, Father, and I'm never cold. So please, don't worry about me. In that place where you are, don't be sick, and don't carry any heavy burdens. Just rest peacefully. Seyeon wrapped her arm around her daughter's shoulder, her hand trembling as she poured a cup of soju. The clear liquid shimmered in the light. She raised the cup and poured it over the base of the headstone, speaking the words she had kept buried for 20 years. Kichol, have a drink. It's the soju you always liked. Seyeon removed her sunglasses, her wet eyes fixed on her husband's photo. The guilt of having to let him go 20 years ago, penniless and in a hurry, washed over her once more. But now, she understood. His departure wasn't a flight. It was the greatest sacrifice he could make to protect them. I don't resent you anymore. At first, I was so angry that you didn't call, but now I understand everything. Her voice was thick with emotion but strong. I understand why you had to run, why you had to live as a shadow. That foolish, beautiful love of yours. I see it all now. She stroked the cold stone, yet she felt the warmth of her husband radiating from within. Thank you for raising our Hyunha to be so beautiful and kind. Truly, thank you. And thank you for loving me until your very last breath, and for never forgetting me. Seyeon swallowed her tears and made a final vow, a promise to the man who was gone and to herself. From now on, I will protect Hyunha for both of us. Even if I must give my life, I will make our daughter the happiest girl in the world. So please, rest easy. One day, a long time from now, when we meet again, you can tell me then that I did a good job. The mother and daughter sat before the grave for a long time, whispering stories to the wind. They talked about the kimchi stew he used to make, the days he used to carry Hyunha on his back, and the first day he and Seyeon had met. It was a time where longing was stronger than sorrow, and laughter more frequent than tears. It felt as though he were right there with them, sharing the kimbap and the conversation. Father, try this piece. I made it myself. The seaweed tore a little on one side, but it tastes wonderful. Hyunha placed a roll before the headstone. Just then, a butterfly appeared from nowhere, landing softly on the kimbap before fluttering away into the blue sky. Look, Mother, a butterfly. Eggsha, Seyeon smiled, looking up at the horizon. He must have enjoyed his meal. As the sun began to dip toward the west, a warm, golden sunset bathed the memorial park. It was time to return. Mother, let's go home. Father would want us to live happily. Hyunha stood up, brushed off her clothes, and took her mother's hand. Yes, Seyeon replied, touching the headstone one last time. Let's go. We will visit often, Kichol. Hand in hand, they walked down the path of the park. A warm spring breeze blew from behind them, as if it were gently pushing them forward. It felt like a whisper from a father's heart. Go safely, my loves. I love you both. Hyunha glanced back once more. She saw the grave standing alone on the hillside in the twilight, but it no longer looked lonely. He wasn't alone anymore, for there were two women who would love and remember him every single night. Mother, what should we have for dinner tonight? Whatever you like, sweetheart. Anything in the world. Kimchi stew. Just like Father used to make, with thick slices of pork. Then that's what we shall have. We'll go home and cook a warm pot together. Their shadows stretched long across the ground. Hyunha's silhouette looked strong and steady, just like her father's, while Seyeon's was filled with the radiant love of a mother. Though her father's body was gone, the three of them would be together forever in their hearts. The winter of suffering had passed, and finally, a true spring had arrived in their lives. This was not the end, but the beginning of a magnificent new story, written in the ink of eternal love.